Welcome to Wild Soul Gathering. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie, and I'll be your host for this episode of Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. Hello to all you wild souls out there. I want to send a special thank you to each and every one of you for taking time out of your day to join and listen to our guests as we discuss the many aspects of spirituality. To stay updated on our latest releases, please follow us, share with friends who may be interested, and if you feel so moved, a kind rating and review is always appreciated. In the tradition of happy hour, cheers to some new insights, peace, revitalization, and perhaps an aha moment that may change your life. Welcome to Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. This is Dr. Sandra Marie, and I am really excited today. We are gifted to have a truly curious spiritual soul in the house, Stacy Michaud. Welcome to the show, Stacy.
Thank you for having me, Sandra.
I'm really excited to have a conversation with you today. In talking with you, you've really delved into a lot of different modalities and seem to have dipped your toe into different things. You have done a little work with Abraham Hicks, immersed yourself into Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, touched a little bit into numerology, the Akashic Records, Life by Designs. You have a special connection with the angels. I'm really eager to talk about what that looked like for you. Speaking with other people, I've had them tell me that on some level life seemed easier when they were more asleep than when they started consciously awakening. Not sure how that looked like for you. And I know, speaking for myself, as a child, I was compelled with the question, like, who am I and why am I here and what does that mean? I remember being 7 years old thinking about these things. With that being said, you want to share a little bit about how you got into a more conscious spiritual journey and what that looked like for you?
Sure. I just wanted to really touch on the mere fact that it took probably many years. I'm 44 at this moment in time. I feel as though my quote-unquote awakening moment was around the age of 36 or 37. And as you said before, when I was a child, basically tromping through the backwoods of Maine, I lived literally on a dirt road in a small little town in central Maine. So it gave an opportunity for me to really dive into and get in touch with my soul on that childlike level. And the woods actually provided me with a lot of opportunity too. And I didn't realize back then, of course, my imaginary friends were really, truly probably my spirit guides. I would talk to them and they would basically talk back to me, and I would understand where they were at and they understood where I was at. And I was a very social little girl and loved to investigate and find out more about what this life was all about. And I often found so much the answers, I guess, when I was on my own in the woods. I also had a horse in high school, and her and I would tromp through the woods as well. I just felt as though I could connect with nature. And honestly, I think I stepped a little bit away from that. As the teenage years approached, I feel as though I don't know if you want to call it the adult intro to life between 8 and 10, when you sort of begin to see the world through different eyes. And unfortunately, you begin to see it sometimes through a negative lens. And of course, it depends on what environment you're raised in and who's surrounding you at the time. I would say my grandmothers were heavy influence on me, very kind, loving. One very quiet, more reserved, and the other one a little more boisterous. Was willing to always share. Of course, I was raised Catholic, went to church every Sunday or Saturday, whichever be. My parents just wanted us to have a religion of some sort to sort of develop a foundation, and then we could basically do what we wanted to, say, after high school and figure out where we wanted to head. Again, I think opening my eyes, if you will, quote unquote, I want to put air quotes out there, at 36 or 37 was a bit more painful than I would have liked. I actually wanted to go back under the rock I was probably living under. Not that I didn't experience life, don't get me wrong. I've had an amazing career as a nurse since the age of 22, graduated with a bachelor's degree, and have had amazing experiences as a nurse. I left the bedside about 8 years ago, but nonetheless, even in the business aspect of nursing, I'm still feeling as though I'm making an impact on the periphery and helping to keep the doors of these hospitals open with the crazy world we live in with the insurance and such, including Medicare. I feel that when I ventured down that, it was just more of actually finally taking a moment and going back to that childlike soul that has been present all this time, but I just kind of tucked her over to the side and said, I'll be back later, sort of thing. I think what was nice, I guess, in amongst all of what I felt as though to be painful was the feeling of connection. I knew that the angels were there, but didn't know they had specific quote-unquote duties. So you have, Archangel Michael is for protection, Archangel Raphael is typically for health and healing, and Archangel Jophiel if you're trying to decide on a color for the walls in your room that you're renovating. So, you specifically can call for their assistance and, of course, give back gratitude and make it as though it has already happened, or allow them to actually guide you in a way that brings joy to the alignment. And that's where I think the law of attractions allowed me to have massive curiosity, just wondering, I'm like, oh, so I'm responsible for this reality that I've created all this time, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It took probably, I want to say 3 years after delving into the law of attraction and what it truly stands for, and I'm still some days not sure why certain things happen, not sure why I'm presented with certain opportunities or decisions, or I'm a Libra, so I'm those scales, and sometimes the scales are a little imbalanced. But knowing and understanding even the numerology aspect of things, or even my tarot, that is my desire on a daily basis, is to gain some sort of stability. All of what's been part of my life in the spiritual side of things has helped me understand some of what has happened over the course of time and throughout my 44 years here on Earth. So I think that's what's been most rewarding, if you will, with all of the transition that had happened. I'm super thankful that it happened even in my 30s. I have my friend's grandmother who I'm super close to, and she's very spiritual. She's 83. So she always makes a comment, because we've been friends for 20 years, that I'm so glad that you chose to do what you're doing and to continue to learn and grow and evolve, and not wait until you're 70 or 80 like she did. So, but she's still thankful that she did indeed get the opportunity to learn before exiting this particular journey. Like I said, I think it's all in perspective. Some days I think I mentioned before when we chatted at one point, Sandra questioned why did I open my eyes, because like I said, some days were a bit daunting.
Wow. Well, I do want to thank you for your service of being a nurse. We have not worked together as nurses, but we seem to have a very similar career path. I do want to go back to the angels real quick. Thank you for the Jophiel. So I just finished painting a room yesterday, and I'm moving on to the next room, and colors have been a big issue. So I and Jophiel will be having some significant conversations later on today. My other question is, when you communicate with the angels, do they identify themselves by name to you, or how do you get that earthly name associated with the angels? I mean, I feel like everyone knows Archangel Michael. As I become more conscious, I had no idea that there were so many different angels.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know if I would have known their specific names had I not looked into it. I know Doreen Virtue, I know she's done some other different things as of late, but a lot of her books, Angels 101, I believe is one of them, really explains, even in like a page to 3 pages, what each of them is truly available to help you with. Once in a while, because I think knowing the names and knowing what they're most able to help you with, that's when the name comes in. I do a lot of thinking and sifting and sorting through my thoughts in my car for some reason. I don't know if I feel more grounded because I have literally not a whole lot of options for distraction. I will turn my radio down and then have some inner conversations going on, and I can seriously feel, it's tough to describe at times, but it's like this woof feeling, whether it be in my back, in between my shoulder blades, literally within my heart, or I might even get the chills. And it's sometimes related, if not all the time, related to what I'm thinking, or I might be verbally talking out loud, not really to myself as I thought all this time. It's not really talking to yourself. I really truly feel that they are listening, and God as well. I mean, my angels, God, my spirit guides. I've even did a little bit of work with the animal spirit guides. They also serve a fair amount of purpose. So I think it's more along the lines of whatever I might be really thinking about. And this sounds interesting, but it works when you're looking for a parking spot in a very heavily populated parking garage or area. I'm not kidding. If you reach out and ask ahead of time, typically Archangel Michael, for whatever reason, he's the one that I tend to call on for help with parking spots. But I'm not kidding you. I literally have been able to find one within minutes of circling and circling and circling in a parking garage. My dad had been admitted to Maine Medical years ago. My stepmom and I were driving around. She's like, we're never going to find a parking spot and we need to get in there because the cardiologist needs to talk to us. And I just sat there quietly, took a deep breath, and just dropped down in for a moment. We turned the next level up and there was a parking spot, the third one in on the right. And then I sat there and said, thank you. I appreciate your time and your effort in something that sounds so simple in the midst of the stress that you're trying to get somewhere. It's super helpful to call them in. Also, when you do receive it right off, because sometimes you don't.
I would agree that there's multiple stories of, I just call them the parking angel, so it's good to know that it's Michael. When you were talking about angels, I love Doreen Virtue. I have that book, Angels 101, and I have a deck of angel cards. I use them similar to what I do with the tarot, though they're, very different tools about the angels and which angel can help me as I'll shuffle the cards, put out there what I'm looking for, and then I'll pick the card and then I'll work with that angel. With the tarot, how does the tarot work for you? Because it seems to be different for different people.
Well, I think it's very similar to what you probably experience. I do have the angel cards that it's a deck from Doreen Virtue too, and it's the angel tarot cards. And there's a mixture of different types. It's not just the angels, so it's really neat when you're shuffling and really asking for guidance on a specific thing. I tend to do the past, present, future pull. I've done the one card, but I don't know if it's because of my indecisive ways sometimes that I'm like, okay, one's probably not enough for me. So I just need maybe some validation of pulling what is probably active in my vibration when I'm getting that past card, and then even more validation to what I'm currently seeing when I pull the present, and then some sort of directive meaning around the future cards. So those three, I've done the 9 card pull too, but of course I tend to want to make myself be in that more aligned space so I get, more meaningful direction from the 9 card pull. So the 3, past, present, future, has truly worked for me in a lot of ways. I'm like, oh, okay. It's like a light bulb goes off. Okay, I get it. That's why this is happening. And this is probably why I'm feeling this way, because that future card, again, it's all up for debate because of our obvious free will in our day-to-day, or even from hour to hour, minute to minute. We could certainly change what direction we might go in. I feel as though when I'm really struggling and trying to ground myself and knowing where I'm at presently and sort of wanting to understand what even happened yesterday and wanting to sort of get some sort of inkling as to what's coming around the corner, that 3 card pull has been super, super helpful.
Nice. Very similar, looking for validation on the past and some different directions to go. So when we talked, and I think how we got connected was, I have historically done a lot of work with Dr. Joe Dispenza. How did you get started with him, and what about him resonates with you?
Well, interestingly enough, I was in the midst of hiring an account manager to help us out with our operation with my previous job. What we do is we basically help the hospitals defend any denials that come in related to inpatient or observation type status. I needed somebody who was relatively strong clinically, didn't necessarily have to be a nurse, but had some sort of a clinical background, had the wherewithal in identifying areas of opportunity and then coming up with solutions that made sense. When I spoke with her, she and I started talking about our spiritual journeys, which was interesting. This was shortly after she was hired. And she's like, have you ever heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza? And I'm like, no. And she's like, okay, so I want you to start off with breaking the habit of being yourself. So I have a ton of dog ears on multiple pages and highlights and little notes on the sides of the pages in that particular book. And she did warn me at the beginning of it. It was a lot of quantum physics, a lot of science, but I believed it was a lot to explain to get you foundationally ready to understand what he was actually going to explain to you over the course of the book. And I know that a lot of what I understood with his work is the frequency and vibration of our bodies, and the thoughts that we have do, of course, get pulled in from the quantum field, if you will. A lot of what we could truly focus in on is our heart, and he has the big three, so it's time, environment, and body, I believe, if I remember correctly from the most recent book. I know I want to read Becoming Supernatural, because that's another one that's, Sandra, you had mentioned would be a good read to sort of dive into. I think it just helped me understand a little more about our external environment, how our thoughts also create what happens in our external environment, despite me wanting to deny that sometimes. And he is big on advising and encouraging meditation, which I am still working to get better at doing on a daily basis. I have to be honest, I don't meditate every day, but when I do, it is usually 10 to 15 minutes. I know he does encourage a 20 plus minute meditation, but it is a practice to really get used to taming what comes in during the moment that we're trying to be quiet, allowing ourselves to be in that space and not get all the distractions even from our heads. At the end of the day, it's truly important to have that time. It's funny, in a 24-hour period, you would think 20 minutes sounds like no problem, I can do it. But when you actually make the time to do it, it can sometimes be a little challenging at times. A lot of his work is really just getting more aligned with the true self and understanding you and your desires and truly what you're here for. It's helped me, I feel it's helped me a lot of ways to ground when I get maybe a little anxious about what I'm trying to understand still within this spiritual journey that I'm on. I really enjoy his work.
He's fascinating. He's got a pretty intense story to tell. He's a chiropractor, if I'm not mistaken, by trade, is his medical background. And he has become a huge researcher who is really just changing the landscape of spirituality and science and bringing them together. So you said that your friend at work got you into this. And I love how things come onto your plate in the most unexpected ways. Once you got into Dr. Joe, what was it about him that resonated with you that kept you going with him? Because he's a lot of work.
Yes. I think what resonated most was my familiarity with Abraham Hicks and the thoughts create your reality concept. And the reality around that is it's true. And no matter how we want to shake it or flip it upside down or mold it into something else, I think at the end of the day, we do have a bit more that we contribute to how things unfold. And oftentimes I really don't want to admit that because I'm like, how did that happen? Or why did I experience that? What was I thinking at the time? So I think that is what truly drew me closer to wanting to know more about his work. I think there's a fair amount to be said that, Hay House has it's such an amazing array of different folks that like Wayne Dyer, Esther Hicks, Abraham, and Louise Hay herself. You Can Heal, I think it was the book You Can Heal Yourself. My friend Graham had given that book to me years ago. So I think it's really how aligned he is with the law of attraction, even if it's inadvertently. There's a lot to be said about that piece. And then, of course, the meditation. I was very curious about how to get that in my day-to-day routine. And again, like I said, life kind of gets in the way when you let it. Being able to slow down long enough and to know that the benefits of meditation is in and of itself amazing. And I know I meditated just the other night for literally just 12 minutes. It was a breathing meditation. I think when we're in a space or, in that area of anxiety, whether we realize it or not, I don't think we breathe. I don't think we take these very shallow breaths. We don't really think about our breathing. I know thank God our bodies know what to do, right? Because our heart and our brain and every aspect of it all, from a scientific standpoint or physiological, it knows what to do. But when you take those nice deep breaths, and even when I'm doing my yoga practice, yesterday I went to an amazing class that was packed full of people. The energy in the room was just unbelievably beautiful, but she did a lot of breathing with us, and it was just so, in a sense, I don't want to say the word relieving, but maybe a weight lifted off my shoulders. I just felt lighter when I left the class. So again, meditation could allow an opportunity for you to feel lighter. Yes, his work is a lot of in the back of this particular book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. There's a lot of different practices related to meditation. I really love how he just explains the benefits of each one and the purpose behind them. So sometimes you'll read, the meditation and you just go with it, which is perfectly fine. I'm always that inquisitive. I want to know the why or the purpose behind something. I can't help it. I'm human. I want to know if there's a benefit that I'm going to receive from doing something. So yeah, I think that, his work and the meditations and the guided ones, especially, I love guided meditations because you're less likely to get sort of off on a thought tangent from what might have happened today or yesterday or whatever. I do like the guided meditations especially.
I'm a big fan of the guided meditations because I have a lot of chatter in my head that is distracting, and I never know if I'm doing it right, so to speak. It's guided. I know what this guided meditation's about. I love that you're so diversified in what you do. For you, you pick what's innately you feel or is fitting into your day. So you said, well, I jumped into yoga this day I did some meditation. You're not locked into one thing. Many times when I talk to people, it's like, I'm a Dr. Joe person and I don't step out of that Dr. Joe mold. It's what I do. Or I do yoga and that's what I do. They're locked into one thing. I did have the gift of being able to go to a Dr. Joe advanced retreat, which is a week-long retreat. And I joked that I was going to meditation boot camp. Well, that was not a joke. This dude has you up at 3 or 4 in the morning, out there in the ballroom meditating, and honestly, you're meditating to 8 or 9 at night. You go home, maybe you get something to eat, and you grab some sleep, and it lives 7 days of that. It's life-changing, and it's great, but then you have to come back to the real world and figure out how do you plug all these different things into your regular life. I've talked about it in some earlier podcasts. I was so anti-meditation for a long time because it just seemed so painful to me because I created this outcome and what I thought you had to do to get there, and it just seemed like an impossible, and I've come to realize that it's really pretty simple. We talked about this, so you spent a lot of time out in the country. I'm out in the country now. You sit at the campfire and you stare at the campfire for hours and you get lost and you find it peaceful. That's a meditation. Staring at the stars is a meditation. I created this whole scenario of a belief system of what I thought meditation was that made it a negative for me. And when I let go of that belief system and realized that meditation can be anything, just sitting here putting my feet on the ground saying, oh, I'm feeling a little lightheaded because I'm anxious. Let me just connect with the earth, and 30 seconds later I'm feeling better. That's a meditation. So I'm stepping away a little bit from my guided meditations and believing in myself. When we talked, you talked about the Akashic Records. And I've always been fascinated with the Akashic Records. Can you talk a little bit about the Akashic Records and what they are and how you use them?
Yeah, again, I think it's more of it brings to light the quote-unquote why behind some of what I've experienced during this journey of mine. I feel as though the Akashic Records, I think the core of it really is learning about prior lifetimes, but there's another piece to it as well, where the woman that I worked with, Chelsea, she had identified even a soul group that I had belonged to and basically still do in prior lifetimes. It just sort of allowed me to understand what truly makes me tick, why I attract certain experiences, why I attract certain people that bring those experiences into my journey. You actually receive sort of a big picture, if you will, over a few lifetimes. It could be I had up to 4 that were identified for me, and there is an apparent theme with each and every one of them that I brought into this one. The theme, and I'm not trying to pull in a negativity here, but it's all about learning and evolving, right, over the course of your awareness and discovery of self is guilt and blame. So I have carried those particular 2 themes over the last 4 lifetimes, and I have experienced a fair amount of that during this one. And I feel as though, even right as I speak in this now moment, that this one is providing me an opportunity to be so aware of it that I can actually sort of, work through it and maybe not have it carry into the next one. And again, I think there's reasons why we forget when we come into, if this is your belief system, which I did resonate the moment I began to learn about it. It was instant recognition. There was no doubt in my mind, despite my Catholic background, that there is that afterlife, and that there's reasons why we don't remember our prior lifetimes, because we're truly here. Once we come here, we're truly here to focus on this one. And I know I would, if I knew all of the details from my prior, I would focus so much on those and doing all I could not to make the same mistakes. It would consume me. So I'm very glad that we don't really necessarily get to remember. We might maybe visually see them or snippets of them, thinking that it might be something we experienced before, but maybe it's, something coming in for a variety of reasons. Again, depending on where your thoughts are in the course of your day. Chelsea brought me through explaining what my quote unquote soul group was, and really truly understanding that I am a very detail-oriented person. No shock there. That I can't stand having imbalance. And it's funny because that also connected to numerology. So my daily number, they call it struggle. I'm not a fan of that word. That particular daily struggle number is number 3, which represents balance and stability. So for her to identify that in my Akashic record reading it blew my mind, because this was shortly after I had done a little work with the numerology and understanding some of what the numbers represent during my now journey. Just knowing that what my quote unquote job might have been in prior lifetimes too. She called it a blueprint technician. So that was really interesting to hear, that I was part of it was emotionally driven, but also an intelligent group of folks who were helping to build the blueprint of the matrix, and what we're currently experiencing today, and some of the negativity and some of the pull that people probably experience on a day-to-day basis, and just sort of getting more familiar with what makes me, and understanding, again, it's that why. I'm always curious, and I love how the title of your podcast is for that curiosity and the meaning behind what you actually will find about yourself when you dive a little deeper into this work. And again, I am not very narrow-minded, and I don't like to stick with one thing. And it might be because the one thing I might have looked into at the moment didn't quote unquote work, or how I viewed it to work for me. And it's not that. I think spiritually I just needed to move into a different direction related to where I was at the time. Learning the meditation, and then learning more about what my past lifetimes were. But it's a very interesting layout of explanation around what I might still be carrying through to this one, with literally 4. And it was, I was reincarnated as a female 3 times and a male 1 other time. I'll give you an example of one of them, which truly blows my mind. But apparently I was reincarnated as a man, and I was the head of a community out in the Wild Wild West during that era. And I had warned everybody in the town that we were getting heavy rains and we were going to experience flooding, and everybody needed to get their things and go to higher ground in the mountains. And everybody just kind of was like, well, I don't know, the clouds look this way. Of course, back then we didn't have weather forecasts, and half the time they're not right anyway these days. So nobody really listened to what I had to say. Later, we experienced the rains, the flooding had happened. Many people lost their livestock, they lost their homes, they lost a lot of their, belongings that were something that couldn't be replaced, and they came back and blamed me, held me completely responsible for their loss and their suffering. That one rings true out of all the four. That one rings like the highest, if you will, around what I've probably experienced, not probably, but what I have experienced this go around as well. I feel as though they're super helpful because I do wonder if that knowledge is actually going to help me move in a preventative way. And I would say I'm a little slow on the uptick in using what I know in some ways as a preventative measure. So I don't have some of these experiences, but again, it's all learning, it's all evolving. That's what we're here to do. I'm in a place of acceptance. Please do all you can not to get mad at yourself and be patient, because I know I get upset with myself sometimes. I'm like, you should know this, and the whole should comes into play. But at the end of the day, that word can go off into the sunset, and we're here, no matter how you spin it, to learn.
Wow, that is an amazing story, and I love the use of the tool. You've identified the pattern and the issues to put action towards it. How amazing is that? And I love that you're the blueprint designer of this time that we're in, where we've actually entered the golden age and we're in this huge shift into consciousness. Wow, now how cool is that? I know you talked about Hay House. It is a great place to go if you really want to see what's out there. Something is bound to resonate with you. The other thing that you talked about, as you've been very curious, I love the different things that you've gotten into. You said that you did something called Life by Design.
It's actually, I looked back in my email because I had briefly looked into it, and that again told me a lot of what I've already learned with the other modalities. It's human design, and even if you Google it and look it up, there's a lot to be explored in regards to that too. I believe it goes into answering a series of questions and sort of has this human-like model. And it sort of looks like it's sitting in Indian style, if you will, and like as if you're in a yoga pose, and I don't know the name of the pose. Nonetheless, it's taking certain areas of your body and connecting them and associating them with numbers. So there's interesting things I learned, but it's very similar to what I had already dove into with whether it be the Akashic Records or the numerology aspect of me. Love and relationships, and the daily number of wanting balance and stability, and really trying to understand how to achieve that on a day-to-day basis. And that's a lot of what that had put together. My friend Dana, she's amazing and very well-versed in it. She's actually does coaching with it. And the cool thing is she'll go on Pinterest and grab a bunch of pictures that basically associate themselves with the meaning behind your discovery. It's been a little bit since I've really visited that again, and I actually should. Don't want to use that word. I could choose to look at it a little deeper. Once again, I think I was going through a time where, again, I was looking for additional answers to some of what I was going through at the moment. I think I might have actually gotten frustrated at not finding that one thing that was going to move me in the quote-unquote right direction. I might not have actually gone in and allowed it to sit with me, but if I were to review it again, I think it would be certainly a bit more understanding around each of the points that it brings to light. But it's very similar. It's almost interesting to see the validation I'm getting from all of them. They're all telling me a very similar story, no matter how I want to twist and turn it. It is a similar story across the board with each of them, which is exciting because at least I'm not sitting here confused, wondering, okay, so this one says this and this one says that. So which one do I listen to, or which one would I want to, dive into a little deeper to learn more about? No, that's definitely not the case with me. It is a really neat, so it's human design. And again, if anybody, Sandra, wanting to connect with my friend Dana, she definitely would love nothing more than to give folks an opportunity to be introduced to it on a deeper level, for sure.
In our show notes, I'll get the names and the contacts of these folks so that people can look in the show notes if they want to pursue. One of the things that I have found, I have a friend who is heavy into numerology, and he did a lot of numerology for me back probably 10, 15 years ago. And it was interesting. About 2 or 3 years ago, I went back and was rereading a lot of my notes, and it was fascinating to go back and look at the information and where I'm at in life now compared to what was said then. I kept getting the same information, but for some reason I kept feeling like maybe I could find something different to put me on a different path. And I just had a chuckle looking at it retrospectively that I probably could have moved ahead a little quicker had I paid more attention. But there were other things in the details as I was reading and looking through my notes that were like, wow, I didn't even really put a lot of attention on that. And the meaning that it had for me 10 years, 15 years later was so profound that it didn't have at the time. There is some value in sometimes just taking a quick look back and seeing where you were at then and the information that you received and where you're at now. Gives it a different lens like everything else. It really does give it a different lens. We're starting 2023. It is going to be a year, I believe, of a lot of change. Many of us are going through some significant change and conscious growth in our lives, so it'll be really interesting rewind and touch base with people a year or 2 years from now and see where their spiritual path has taken them. And what I love about and what I'm very grateful for your willingness to be on the podcast is you're what Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious is all about. How do we leverage all these things that are available to us and continue to grow ourselves spiritually? And you put yourself out there and you're willing to experiment, give it a try, see where it resonates with you and what doesn't resonate with you. With all the things that you've used to this point, because what I would share with you, I've got a few decades on you, is it just seems to evolve and change. What resonated with me back then doesn't necessarily resonate with me now, although it had value. I've moved on to different things, and it's not because I'm flighty. That served its purpose, and now I'm looking for something different. Which of these seems to be resonating the most with you at this time?
I think the constant out of all of the things that I've dabbled in and resonated with is law of attraction. I know sometimes I get frustrated with it, but at the end of the day, it's actually saved me from a lot of potential heartache and emotional distraught, to be honest. Sometimes I get to the point where I'm like, okay, oh, please guide me in some way. I'll throw a YouTube 8 to 11 minute Abraham Hicks episode on, and sometimes I wait for whatever might come my way. Our phones listen to everything we say. I think I want to say that some of what shows up, because I subscribe to a handful of the channels that have Abe on them, they sometimes come to me at the right time. Some of the titles completely like, oh, I guess I want to listen to this one. Or I'll go and actually just type in the search field for what I'm looking for some help with. And that seems to be the biggest part of the work that's resonated, and I think that's been the most constant with me. I would love nothing more than the meditation practice to be a bit more of a constant, and that's some of my goals that I'd like to work on for 2023 is to increase the time in which I practice the meditation. But I use all the tools, if you will, that I've learned over time, but law of attraction seems to, I don't know if it's so much, maybe it's easier for me because I understand that those thoughts that come in that I choose to give recognition to, I don't want to say power because sometimes we don't want to give our power away to our thoughts because it could probably not go in the best direction for our own good, if you will. I think at the end of the day, I'd have to say law of attraction's been the one that resonates most and aligns with my current state spiritually.
Nice. I would say when it comes to the meditation and we'll say spiritual life balance, be kind to yourself. And more patient with ourselves. Actually, I think I'm speaking to myself as I'm saying these words.
And I think, I had read something about 2023 being the year of 7. So if you add the 2 and the 2 and the 3, and I think the biggest meaning attached to that is compassion. So I think it's either compassion, probably more for ourselves, and maybe a little bit for others, but I think a lot of us already have shared a fair amount of compassion for others, and it's really, I keep hearing the words "my turn" for this year, and not in a negative way. I'm not gonna,
Wow.
throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I just, yeah.
That's very powerful that you said that, compassion, and that you heard the words "my turn." You can't take care of others, quote unquote, if you've not taken care of yourselves. We, in our Western culture, society, many times see taking care of ourselves, my turn, as being selfish and narcissistic, when in fact it's not at all. And it's not that way in other cultures. So let go of that, which is not easy to let go because we've been so ingrained and trained to do that, and that it is okay to take care of ourselves. And I truly believe if you're compassionate with yourself, the rest just falls in line. That energetic signature that you put out there, you start attracting different things into your life. Stacy, I'm really glad to have you on the show. I'd really like to wind up the show right now. I know that you're a very unique individual and clearly very special soul. There are a lot of folks out there who are walking a similar path as yours and really looking for a direction or not really sure what getting on a spiritual path is. What would you say to those folks who are just consumed with living life but looking for something else?
I think the biggest message that I even think I wrote it down in my journal yesterday is really listen to what your intuition is telling you. That's another piece to this year coming, is intuition and trusting it. And I do fall short of that at times, I will admit. But there's always opportunity to, pick yourself up off the floor or pick those pieces up. If you're not the one on the floor, if there's just a few pieces. Life gets busy, and I feel as though sometimes, especially these days in the world we live in, it gets very busy and super distracting. But there's always this potential weird little nudge that you're probably getting from the universe and that you're probably getting from God or whatever your belief system might be, that it's time to sort of step back and give yourself a hug and allow yourself that time to dive into Akashic Records or tarot or angels. But again, it's like really knowing what's resonating with you. And honestly, I didn't even know what that word meant before the age of 35. I have to be, as I guess, academically smart as I am, I didn't have a clue what resonate. What does that mean? In alignment. I thought alignment meant you get your tires aligned for your car. I didn't have any clue as to the fact that it's alignment with self, alignment with what your beliefs are, and honor those nudges. Because if you choose not to, it's perfectly fine. But I tell you, they're going to get louder. And that's another piece as to what I think drew me down this path, is these nudges just kept getting louder and louder and louder. And one of my friends referred to it as a cosmic 2x4, when you're finally at the point where Spirit knows you're ready. You're ready to listen. You're ready to understand. You're ready to learn. You're ready to be curious. And it's just it's a neat, like I said, it was initially quite painful. I'd say for, 2.5, 3 years. And sometimes it still is. But it's all about the journey we're on. And I don't want to say, that comes along with it. Again, it depends on what you're attracting. Where's your vibration? Where's your frequency? As Abe always says, what channel are you tuning into? Where's your signal? Because we're all at a cellular level made up of frequency and vibration within these little cells of ours. So that intuition and trusting it is super important. That's the biggest message I feel as we wind down this podcast. And I certainly appreciate you, Sandra, for giving me this opportunity to share my spiritual journey with others. And, it's not a competition. I learned that too early on. You don't compete with others that might know more, that might actually... I have a lot of friends who they seriously can communicate, probably at a higher level than I can with the angels. And they receive messages that nobody else would ever know about other folks. And I love that about them. But in the initial stages, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't do that. That means I might as well not even bother with this stuff. But that's not the point. It's really, at the end of the day, what resonates with you, what helps you. Allow this journey to be a bit more fun and joyful, because we are definitely not here to experience pain, sorrow, and struggle.
Wow, that is a very, very powerful message. And I can't thank you enough for being willing to be on the show, being so open and sharing. And for those out there who want to be curious, you mentioned the YouTubes. There are so many free tools that are available that you can delve into. Even with meditation, someone turned me on to Insight Timer. It's an app on the phone many years ago. It's free and it's got thousands of different meditations. I just want people to be aware that there are tons of free tools that are available also. Again, Stacy, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to be on the show. I really appreciate your willingness to be so open. You put your heart into it. Thank you so much for sharing your spiritual journey.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
For all you listeners out there, thank you for joining us today. And remember, embrace that wild soul. Until next time. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us for this episode of Wild Souls Gatherings Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. To find out more about our guests, how to contact them, or detail on this episode, please see our show notes. You can also visit us at our website, wildsoulsgathering.com. We would love to hear from our visitors what you thought of this show, what you would like to see and hear in the future, questions you may have. Go to podinbox.com/happy hour for the spiritually curious. You can leave either a voice or traditional message for us. This is your host, Dr. Sandra Marie, sending each of you peace and love. Until we meet again, embrace your wild soul.